For nearly a year, no one knew. Behind the steel door of a storage unit, something sat in the dark, decomposing, rotting, and slowly giving itself away. Eventually, someone reported a foul stench, and Mequon, Illinois deputies were dispatched to investigate. The unit belonged to Marcy Oglesby. At first, Marcy claimed the odor was caused by old clothes and that a possum had died in the unit. But that lie quickly unraveled when officers discovered the decomposed remains of Marcy's husband, retired police chief Richard Young, hidden there for nearly a year. Evidence showed that Marcy poisoned Richard slowly, lacing his food and drinks with eye drops containing tetrahydrozoline, a vasoconstrictor that in large repeated doses can dangerously suppress heart rate and breathing, ultimately causing death. Before confronting Marcy, police carefully collected blood samples from her hands, looking for the smallest of hints that could tie her to the crime.
I was told that you have some sort of substance on your hand. Can you hold your hands out for me, please?
Yeah. I think some of it is my blood because I did lick myself a little bit.
Okay.
And I don't know what that is.
Can you hold your hand out for me, please?
It's pretty dry. Oh yeah, I'm guessing that's my blood because now I can feel the cut. I was using a big knife to open the box, and I got ripped off. I worked in a lab. I know what you're gonna do.
And then you had some on the back side of your hand there?
Yeah.
Just to let you know, everything has audio and video recorded in this room, okay?
Yes, sir. But thank you for telling me that. There's some right here and also. I know it's probably in my best interest to talk to a lawyer, but I also feel like I want to just get this done. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
so no, we're good.
All right. Well, obviously, you know why we're here.
Yes, I did.
So I'm going to let you tell me what happened.
Rick got COVID. He was very sick for quite a while. He can be a very, he can be a very difficult person to try to deal with. I mean, nice person, but just stubborn when it came to health or anything else. So, we've been together for 24 years. I just basically was a bit of a bully, and I'd let him bully me because I'm a doormat.
How so?
Like, I paid all the bills. The man wouldn't go buy himself shoes or jeans or anything else. I took care of everything while he hoarded money. And, like if we were low on groceries or something, or, I couldn't afford to pay a bill, I was working 10, 12 hours a day. But I'd get up at 4:30 in the morning, go take a shower, go get ready for work, go to work, and come home, and he would have sat there all day long after he retired, He would have just sat there all day long and watched porn or did whatever. And if I said, hey, I need some help with the bills this time or whatever, he might eventually give it to me, but he would complain the whole time. And, well, what are you doing with your money? I'm supporting the whole household. So, our relationship was always, if I didn't go along with things the way he wanted, he'd make my life miserable. But I loved him, so I put up with it,
Did he live there in Mequon with you?
Yes, he did. So everything was fine, but when he got COVID, I couldn't get him to go to the doctor. I couldn't get him to agree to, he was like, just give me some medicine, it's a virus, it'll work, it'll write itself out. He was so sick, he was throwing up. For 2 weeks, he couldn't hold anything down, even water. And I would beg him, let me take you to the doctor, and, or stay in bed, and I did the best I could to take care of him. But he was taking so much medicine and stuff, like, he was constipated. So I literally, because I've worked in medicine for 20 some years. I worked in ICU, CCU, I knew what I was doing. I wasn't recklessly, just saying, let me take care of you. When he wouldn't go to the doctor, I was like, okay. So, at one point in time, I literally he had an infection. He couldn't poop.
Mm-hmm.
And finally I sat down and I said, do you realize I love you? And I'm being tough here, telling you need to go to the hospital and you need to have proper care, because of that. He'd wait till I fell asleep, just completely exhausted from taking care of him. And instead of I put a little bell in there, I gave him options to wake me up. He'd get up on his own and fall, So I was like, why are you doing this? I'm here. I'm here to help you. Well, I'm putting too much stress on you, you don't feel good, I need to take care of this myself. So then it got to the point where it was almost like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like he was deliberately making it harder for me to take care of it. And by getting up, I'd get up and go to the bathroom, and I'd be like, if you're ready to get up, go to the chair, do whatever you eat. Let's go to just give me a minute to go pee. And I would come back and he'd be up and he'd be on the floor. We were, looking at a new house. I went to look at the house. I get back, my little old stepmom cannot pick him up off the floor, And I said, if you want to get up before I leave to run to Avon to look at this house, let me get you up. Because Ma can't pick you up. I wasn't gone 20 minutes. He got up, fell, and when I called him, he was sitting on the floor. And he's like, no, I'm fine. I'll be here till you get back. Just constant, constant things. So then, probably, I don't know, the fourth time he fell, broke his nose. He looked like he'd been through a prize fight. And, when you've already had a problem in the past, it's not funny to sit there, like my nephew walked in and went, what happened to you? And he's like, her. Thank God I had a witness that he fell, and broke his own nose. But he would think this was funny to sit there and be like, her. She'd finally had enough of my shit, stuff like that. He had a bad tendency to dramatize things, tell his kids things to make himself come out seeming more important. He had just this tendency to do that. So, when he got to the point where he couldn't really talk because he'd thrown up so much, all of the gastric juices and, everything had him so he could barely talk.
Okay.
Stephen would call and check on it here and there. But his kids never gave a damn about anything but getting money. Stephen, on the other hand, doesn't. He's one of these people, I don't want an inheritance from my parents. I don't want anything that makes it look like you're happy they're dead, Once again, he'd started feeling a little bit better. Started getting some strength back. And he got to the bathroom, and I came back in from taking the dog out to pee. And he had fallen in the bathroom. And I was like, went in, helped him up. And he's like, I want to go out to the RV. Because he had a big RV at the time. He's like, I want to go out to the RV and just stretch out, and not bug anybody with what I want to watch on TV and anything else. And I was like, well, at least you're not trying to go by yourself, because a couple times he went out there by himself and, crashed, and, he was just so stubborn about everything. And so, I was like, okay, well, we'll go. And he had a hold of my shoulders, and I helped him get out there and sat down on the edge of the bed. And he said, thank you. He said, I don't feel so good. He's like, I feel funny. And I said, okay, well, let's get you laid down. And I, kind of went to, help him get turned around. And he just stopped. I mean, literally, like that. And I realized, oh my God, he broke his neck when he fell. Nothing else would stop. I mean, I worked in medicine for nothing else would have just stopped. Like no sign of anything. He was fine. He was up walking 1 minute, and literally it was just kind of like flop and gone. And I sat down and I freaked out, and I have a lot of PTSD when it comes to people dying. And I sat there for a long time, and I made a horrible decision. He had asked me to promise him something a long time ago. And I had promised him that. And it was like,
What was that?
he couldn't get buried with his mom and dad. There was no room at the cemetery, close to them. And he didn't really want to be anywhere else. He wanted to be up on the Indian mound outside of town. I said, so you want me to basically cremate you and go off and trespass on somebody's land, because, that belongs to somebody else. And that was where he felt home. That was where him and his beagles would always go hunt and everything. And I said, so you want me to, sneak off and scatter you? And he's like, I don't want to be cremated. I said, well, that's impossible. And, he was like, well, I guess if you have to cremate me. And I don't really have a good explanation for it, other than I sat there crying. And, I went in the house, and, Mom's like, what's going on? I said, oh, he's really sick. I need to take him to the hospital. And I, of course, wasn't going to involve my stepmom. She thought he was at the hospital. And like I said, they weren't real close. They tolerated each other, basically. So she didn't think anything of it when I said, I just, he's real sick and he needs to go to the hospital. And she didn't think too much of it. And after a couple days of me getting my head out of my butt and realizing I needed to just report, I should have just called when it happened and done the normal thing that any normal human being would do. And then at that point I was like, okay, well, I didn't do the right thing. And I got scared, and it just kept compounding and compounding until I I was like, okay, so what do I do? I didn't report this. It's, you know, that's a criminal act. And, all I could think about was the mummy thing, outside of Knoxville. And everything. And it's like, but it wasn't like a religious thing or, you know, it was me just being depressed and devastated and sitting there thinking that I promised him that and I knew his oldest child was never going to cooperate with that. And I just made a really stupid decision and then didn't know how to. I was like, okay, so do I go in and say I made a stupid mistake? And, but I mean, x-rays and everything will show that, that I didn't hurt him. I tried to take care of him and I wouldn't hurt a fly. I would never kill someone. I was so devastated. I just didn't, I just didn't quite know. It was like I wasn't in the right mind.
I'm going to backtrack just a little bit.
Okay.
Obviously, I told you that you said you know why we're here. Because of the body.
Yes.
And that body is of Rick Young.
Yes.
Former Waupun police chief.
Chief of police, yes. Yes, we were married together for 24 years.
From the night that he fell in the bathroom, he then walked him from the bathroom to the bedroom?
No, out to the RV.
Walked him out to the RV.
Yes.
But that's where he was he on a bed, on a couch?
He was on the bed, bed back in the RV. And he said, I don't feel very good. And I basically put my arms around him and, went to pull him up to me, just to give him, some support and everything. And literally when I pulled him up to me, it did something unnatural. And it was like that, honestly. It was like that. And I screamed and I, like you would normally, I took his piece and, I was like, honey, honey, honey. And he was just gone. It happened like that. I've never seen anything, in all my years of medicine, I've never seen anything like that. There was always I've seen heart attacks, I've seen strokes, I've never seen anything like that.
How long did you keep him in the camp, or was he in the RV that night?
Just like 24 hours. Till I figured out how to move him.
He's been in that storage unit ever since. Who helped you get him over there?
I did it by myself. Wasn't easy. It was like early in the morning, and I kind of wiggled the box, from there over to the storage unit. I did it all by myself.
I don't believe that.
I would take polygraphs and swear to you on everything that's sacred to me. I literally took and kind of got it down, got the box down the steps and like, I don't know how to demonstrate. if we're just kind of switching a book up, something heavy, in a box a little bit at a time. That's literally how I did it. I just used my foot and my arms and just kind of took it and took it across a little bit at a time.
You didn't use anything to wheel him over there?
We had a dolly, but the box wasn't, it wasn't strong enough for that to work. So that's why I literally just scooched it a little bit at a time. Honestly, if I would have had help, I probably wouldn't have put him in the storage unit. If it hadn't been something I was doing depressed and stupid all by myself, then I would have, if I had an accomplice or something, I would have come up with a better plan. But I was panicky and not right in the head. Bless you.
So what was your plan?
I was going to figure out how best to give him what he wanted, to find a way to put him up on the mound, and figure out a way to properly eventually somehow, I hadn't figured that out yet, to actually report his death somehow and at least give his kids peace. I was trying to figure out how to do the right thing the wrong way, and it just kept getting bigger. A lie gets bigger, and it just keeps getting bigger, and I wanted so bad. It was a relief. Last night was a relief to be able to finally just say, look, I screwed up. I was afraid that because of our past, the fight we had, and me being in jail and all of that stuff, I was afraid to just tell the truth and somehow try to find a way to give him what he wanted. And I was so depressed and so screwed up and so scared. And I just lost the person that was literally my guide for 22 years. Because I was so lost after my daughter died. If it hadn't been for Rick, I probably would have several times. He was that person who took care of him. So, okay. I thought you said you had my phone.
I do have your phone, and we're going to do a search warrant on it. We're going to go through it.
Okay.
How many people knew that Rick was over there?
In the storage shed? Me. That was it. Just me.
Did your mom know?
I think she suspected there was something wrong.
If we talk to your mom, what do you think she's going to tell us?
That she thought that I was, hiding something, but she just thought he was in Iowa.
Do you think she would know any details of how he died?
Yeah. No. She knew he was falling all the time. He was doing that in front of her. She knew that he, had fallen and knew that there were, she also knew that he was not cooperating with the program. She'd even sit there and tell him, why don't you just stay in the chair, stay in bed, or use the walker. I had a walker, trying to help, but I didn't have any intention of hurting anybody, and definitely not, my elderly stepmom or, my family. I didn't have any intention of hurting him. Ultimately, his family has not gotten to grieve, because of the choice that I made. And but I never meant to hurt anybody, and that's why I did this on my own. This was my choice and mine alone.
Okay.
Nobody else knew. Nobody else knew.
Are you still doing the art dealer thing?
Trying to,
How's that going?
not very well.
Is that out of Nigeria?
Well, the business itself is out of here, but I have 23 different artists from the African or Caribbean diaspora
Okay.
that all contribute.
Was there one from Nigeria?
Yeah.
Are you particularly close with him?
Yeah, it's my best friend.
Is there any kind of a romantic relationship there?
There has been.
So did Rick know about that?
Yeah.
Did he have a problem with you being still friends with him and working with him?
No. Well, he said he didn't. I mean, he would make comments here and there, that were jealous sounding and, and everything. But he also knew how much money I had invested into doing all of the art, and the only way I was ever going to see that back is to sell it. So that's why he kind of accepted that, and that's what caused the whole problem to begin with. When I was in jail before, because I'm a soft-hearted idiot, I had listened to someone that I kind of thought of as like a daughter to me. And she was telling me all about how her fiance was abusing her in front of the baby, and that she wanted to get away. And so I kind of backdated a couple of documents for her. I was like, okay, I'll give you a job, when you get out of here. And backdate this a little bit, because the only way she said she could leave was to get a loan. When I got arrested for that, that's when Rick started going through, paperwork and going through and realizing that I wasn't spending all my money on taking care of us, that I had invested into doing the art. And that's when he realized that there was something starting romantically between Sunny and I. And he sat there and said, oh, well, this check and this check, I didn't authorize her to do, even though, like I said, I've had power of attorney. And he used to sit there all the time and tell me, if you need this, write a check for it. If he couldn't write me one, he'd be like, so there were several times throughout the course of it. But I knew he was mad, and I knew he was hurt, and I knew he was upset. So I didn't even fight this. I was like, you know what? I'll pay you back the money that you say you didn't authorize. But the man had my car when supposedly I was, when I was in jail. He was driving my car, came and picked me up in my car, wouldn't let me drive myself home. And when, I was like, I'm sorry. I understand you're upset. I understand you're hurt and everything. And he was like, well, I want to work this out. I want to talk this out. I figured he was going to, he put me in jail and was going to do whatever. And, he was sitting there saying some unappealing, things about he could handle losing me to anything, anybody else in the world, but not a fucking. Sorry, but that's exactly what he said. So race was a serious issue, but we still worked on things and worked them out just the way. I mean, we've had a lot of fights over 24 years. We had people do, and he very much wanted everything his own way, and could be a very dominating person.
What was this guy's name in Nigeria?
His name is Sunday.
How do you spell that?
Well,
Sunday.
Sunday is like the day of the week. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. I got up really early yesterday morning, and things are not, even my medicine is not coming to me.
How often do you talk to him?
Every couple of days.
But you don't remember how he's entered in your phone.
Give me a minute and I will. Like I said, it's something affectionate. It's in there as my something.
My love, my...
Give me a minute. It'll come to me.
My baby.
That's it. Thank you. That's it.
So he's in your phone as my baby, but you were back together with Rick.
Well, not in the last. I mean, like I said, I've only been using that phone for a while. For a couple months.
Okay.
Rick has not been there since. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. I never stopped having feelings for him. I went back to Rick out of, honor and duty, and we made a deal, and I felt bad, and I felt responsible, and I loved him. I wasn't in love with him, but I still loved him and wanted to take care of him, and felt like no matter what, I owed him taking care of him. And about the time that I was thinking that maybe we needed to talk about how things were going to go is when he got COVID. It's when he got sick. And I wasn't going to look at him and say, oh, maybe you need to try Kentucky again, or, I'm too damn young for you, and you're too old and grumpy, and just... We hadn't been deeply intimate for a long time. First and foremost, he was not physically capable anymore. The man that had cancer twice, it takes its toll on your love life. But I mean, we still hugged and kissed and, and things. And
So were you still romantically involved with Sunday while he was there?
well, Cindy and I talk. I've never met the man face to face. There's never been any, it's not like it was anything but talk. Texting, stuff like that. I have never physically been with him.
Did you consider him like a boyfriend? No, as far as the way your relationship?
More like a fantasy, more like something that filled in the blanks.
Right. Nope.
I knew there was not going to... I mean, we're 6,224 miles apart.
Right.
I was with someone who was 22 years older than me and not the most affectionate human being in the world. I had a midlife crisis and took some solace and comfort in, someone sitting there talking to me. There was no physicality, no anything like that. And Rick knew that. But he was still, at that point, very burned up with, like I said, the man sat there and told me, if you would have said, I've fallen in love with somebody, we're too far apart, blah, 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 I could accept that. But,
So when Rick got COVID, did he get diagnosed with COVID, or Did he just refuse to go to the doctor at all? He just assumed.
He just refused to go to the doctor. We did a home test. Well, what started the whole thing is he had a serious sweet tooth. And I was sitting in the bedroom painting, and he came in, and we were talking about, the painting I was doing. And I would keep this little thing of Heath bars, little miniature Heath bars, on the desk. And he grabbed one, and he was like, when did they start making mint-flavored Heath bars? They didn't, I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, no, they're mint-flavored. Try one. So I tried it. It wasn't mint-flavored. I said, no. So then he's like, okay, well, he said, they're good that way. Didn't think anything of it. Well, then he came in and said his coffee tasted like mint. And he said, and everything's got a little metallic wang to it. And I said, that's the kind of stuff that happened when I had COVID. I said, maybe we better test you. And we did, and it came out positive. And, I called a friend of mine who's a doctor, and I said, so what's the recommended thing now to, go in and, yeah.
Okay, so you called a doctor friend. Did he give you some medicine to give Rick?
No, because at the time he wasn't, at that point in time, it was just like he had, a little off taste and a little runny nose, and he felt perfectly fine. And he said, no, he said, no, just let him write it out. He said, there's really nothing that, that we recommend. He said, as long as he's not burning up with fever or, any of those things. He said, if he gets a fever, give him Tylenol, but if it becomes significant, if it becomes respiratory, then that's when you need to get him, whether he wants to go or not, you need to get him into the doctor. It never did. It never, had a little cough for a couple days. But his all stayed in his throat, sinuses, and ears. So he, when I would sit there and be like, are you coughing? Are you feeling anything in your chest? He'd be like, no, it's just this damn stuff in my ears and being dizzy all of the time. He said, that's, and he said, and that just needs to pass. He's like, I'm not, dying of coughing or, I don't need a vent or any of that stuff. So that's why he just didn't want to. He hated being in the hospital. He'd been...
Right. So it wasn't like super serious. More of a head cold.
Well, he was dizzy all the time. The throwing up was very serious.
Right.
But and that's when I kept telling him, you need to, but as long as he could, at least once a day, keep down a milkshake and, things like that.
So you are 100% sure that your mother doesn't know any of the details of how he died or where he's been for the last year.
Right.
So if I told you that we've already been talking to her and I have another investigator who's interviewing her at the same time and she's given details that match pretty closely to what you're telling me, how would you explain that?
She's a little old lady and I didn't want anything bad to happen to my mom.
I understand that. But
I would rather take it on myself because anything, like she didn't physically go help me,
right.
Nobody helps me, do the, moving across the street or, anyway.
You really get across the street.
I really, exactly the way I said. I really did.
You didn't use a cart.
No. I started to. A car?
Cart.
Oh, I started to, but the box was not strong enough for it
So
to.
the dolly cart thing that was kind of jerry-rigged together that was sitting beside the box in the storage unit.
No, that was put together long after that.
What was that for?
Just trying to move a bunch of heavy stuff, and I was going to try and at least move that.
I understand trying to protect her, okay, but in this situation, the best way to help yourself is to be completely honest and tell us everything now, because we're going to follow up on all this stuff. We're going to check the bank accounts. We're going to check all that stuff. And then when we start finding things that don't line up with what you're telling us now, that just makes it look worse further
Right.
on.
Right.
So, going back to it all, is there anything that is not 100% correct that you've told us that you need to change?
Nothing I can think off the top of my head.
This bank account, you said one check, and then you said one or two checks.
It was one or two.
And it's not going to end up being 2 or 3 or 4 or a dozen.
No.
So there could be a year's worth of Social Security deposits in that bank account.
Right, because the checks, anything that was done for a certain time that he wrote to me, he was alive.
Okay.
So once he was no longer living, I wrote one, but everything else that I did, he was alive at that time and authorized. And then when a bunch of them came back, that's when I had to deal with it. So they were not paid out of his account.
Was that stuck in Fulton County?
Yeah. Rick would sit there and tell me stuff and tell everybody stuff that 100% was not true. Just like when I went and spent, and did all of the escrow money and everything in my name for the house, out in the country. He couldn't wait to be on the phone telling his children, we bought a house. And he contributed to, was primarily the one buying this house. And it's like, I can't get you to buy groceries. I mean, if we need to get to the point where I can go back and show you where Karen and I spent the last 20 years paying for almost everything. And if you look through his checking accounts and all of his documents, you will see it's cigarettes to the Miracle Mart, gas money, etc., etc. But there's nothing to a clothing store. There's nothing to, buying groceries. There's nothing to paying Ameren or a cell phone bill, or, there might be one a year. Because he was sitting there hoarding up money, letting everybody else pay for his life.
So the bounce checks in Fulton County, that was while he was still alive?
Yes. He was sick, but he was still alive. And didn't know that I had written him. So, okay. I guess I didn't want to ask here. I was really confused when, the deputy, was like, okay, you're no longer in our custody. Mm-hmm. We talked to the state's attorney, and they're going to come talk to you and see, figure out where everything is. So at this point, do I still need to be talking to the attorney and seeing where? Right. Did I just make a huge mistake sitting here trying to do the right thing?
Right now, you're not being charged anything.
Okay. I'm only asking this. I mean, I know there will be consequences for what it is, and even if they are financial restitution, paying for a funeral, whatever. I, you know, if there needs to be other things, then so be it. At this point, like I said, this was a relief to me. At this point, I would love to sit down with the state's attorney or you or whoever needs to be done and pull out all the paperwork and everything and just say, this is it.
It will come a time for that. But right now, we're going to make sure you're okay.
Well,
That's one of our biggest concerns right now is obviously you have car problems and they feel it's serious enough you need to go to fuel area.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my troponin flows way up. I'm not going to argue.
that's what we're concentrating on right now. You're obviously able to talk to us, but we're not going to haul you off to jail. We're not going to send you tie you to a monitor. We're not going to push somebody outside your room, so no, you're not under arrest. First and foremost, yes, you're probably going to be charged. And you had a man brought you strapped in your storage unit for over a year.
And
There's no getting around that. There's no amount of talking that's going to be about that.
No.
But what I find it very hard to believe that you did all that by yourself, and you've already admitted and trying to protect people that are important to you.
on that one, though, I'm not. My mom is literally the only person that knew, and like I said, she was in bed. She was in bed when I did it. From the time I got him, went, from the RV to, she was in bed.
And
She knew what I did, but she didn't help. No,
any of your other family members know?
no, not at all. They're all going to be looking mighty shocked. Because I've been telling them the same thing, that he was over, that, recovering and living life, more peacefully, and nope, not a single one of them has an utter clue. And I would swear on my daughter's grave to that. Not a one. And I'll tell you, when I got over to that storage unit, I was a sweaty mess who couldn't breathe. Paranoid, freaked out, thinking somebody was going to come around the corner. So, no, I've always been, I know I don't look tough right now. When I was a teenager, I used to work at Sears back in putting people's appliances in their vehicles for them. I have more brawn than brain, I guess.
So yes, there will be a time and a place to address all of that. But right now, it's not going to be that time.
Okay.
Right. And circling back around to what Sergeant Davis was asking you a little bit ago. I know you said you made some error in judgment. For somebody who has admittedly said they've got money problems, right now already has warrants out for deceptive practice. You understand where we're coming from when you find out that somebody has been shoved in a storage unit.
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
This is where we're telling you if what you're telling us is true, fine. So be it. But we're going to figure out what.
Right, and that's why I said I would prefer to just sit down and bring everything to the table. All his documents, my documents, everything. I'm just going completely brain empty here.
Before we finish, I have to ask, what a situation like this? You said that he was abusive, at least emotionally.
Oh yeah, he was never physically abusive.
But he was emotionally abusive. And yet...
Do I want to say abusive or do I want to say... Yeah, I guess. Oh.
And you've got Sunday that you're talking to, and I totally understand that situation. I totally understand. Were you giving him more medications than maybe he needed, trying to keep him just out of your hair? You weren't giving him any other drugs that was keeping him down, keeping him, from being emotionally abusive to you.
Oh, no, no, no. No.
You weren't giving him anything that could have caused him to lose his balance. Anything like that.
No, everything that, he was taking was things like, to get his balance back and for the nausea and for all of that. That was, I mean,
Over the counter.
over the counter. Yeah, and I mean, half the time he would be like, bring me my medicine, and then he would decide not to take it anyway. So, he took what he wanted to when he wanted to. He was the one picking up his meds and doing it.
All I'm saying is I understand the situation. I understand if you were trying to help yourself get out of a situation
Right.
and it went too far.
Yeah.
I would understand that.
No.
And I think other people would understand that too. So
Right.
that's why I'm giving you the opportunity, if that's what happened,
Yeah.
to
No.
say it.
I because in actuality, the more sick he was, and the more he was in this position, the worse it was on me, because he would, when he would get up and fall, I'm the one who had to get him up. I mean, my back was breaking, and I would look at him in tears and say, honey, please, don't do this to me. My body can't take it.
So you're absolutely sure there's nothing but over-the-counter medications that's going to be in his blood when we do the autopsy?
Should be nothing but.
Should be, or is? Nothing
Well,
but.
to my knowledge, that's all there is. It's over the counter.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, he had the ability to take what he wanted to, but to my knowledge, the only thing he had sitting there was, other than over-the-counter stuff, was just things like Tylenol and Advil, and so, yeah.
Okay.
To my knowledge, that's it.
All right. Anything else? All right. Well, I appreciate you talking to us. It helps us out a lot, just trying to get the whole thing pieced together. At this point, with your condition the way it is, I've talked with the state's attorney, and we're releasing you at this point. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be charges later on,
Right.
but you're not being held as of right now. So there's not going to be any guards sitting with you or anything like that, okay?
Okay.
But we are doing the reports and doing the investigation, and, there definitely was crimes here. So
Yeah.
there will probably be charges coming in the future. Okay. But as of right now, you're not going back to jail as soon as you get released or anything like that. Okay.
So, because, I mean, like I said, it's been 24 years of my life, and did love him, and all I could think about was so much for any dignity that I ever hoped to give him. So does he go, I mean, will something be, is he...
He's with the coroner's office right now, and then there'll be an autopsy scheduled probably Monday or Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I would assume the coroner will be reaching out to family to make arrangements with what happens from there.
After the interrogation, Marcy was released pending further investigation, but after toxicology results revealed that Richard had died from tetrahydrozoline poisoning administered slowly over months, her charges were upgraded to murder. Though Marcy maintained that she did not kill Richard, in June 2025, a bench trial concluded with guilty verdicts for first-degree murder, attempted murder, and aggravated battery. Marcy was sentenced to 50 years in prison. But her legal fight isn't over. In December 2025, an appeal was filed, and the case is now before the appellate court.